We're back. So I wanted to make a video on Zato. What happened to him? It's obvious before he was a very strong character. I mean, I believe like Jonathan Tene went to every major he could and top 8 everything except Evo. We saw Latif's dominant season in later season 1. I think that's kind of how the character first actually got shown to the world, was by Latif. You know, you have Goabo winning events like Evo Japan, doing strong in online, just over in Japan. You had players like Infiltration, Peppery Splash, right? I guess those are the main Zato players from that go to tournaments. But point is, regardless, he was a very strong character. I mean, he had a lot of strengths, but he had some weaknesses, but his strengths were just so good, especially with the system mechanics and the overall meta of the game. He just fit in pretty well. Whether you play Zato and you think that this current version, which I have up, is the Oscar patch, so thank you to whoever, I forgot the name, but someone made a mod where you can basically go back and play in lab and the previous patches. So that's what I'm on now. For example, I mean, you see Eddie die and then you see the Eddie timer is extremely fast. So this is right before season 3 where everything went downhill. So I kind of want to talk about it right before he got nerfed. What happened to him? A strong tournament character that was in every top 8 to here. So I think the first step is, let's talk about Zato's weaknesses in this version where he is strong. He's definitely considered a top 10 character in this version. Pretty, undoubtedly. Someone who played the character as well, I mean, he was, like I said, very strong. But he did have some weaknesses. So the first one would be, this one is a little, it's not really a weakness, but I guess it's something different. So getting Eddie on the opponent, that was something tricky. A lot of characters had built-in options to get around his RPS and the way he set up Eddie on you. And, obviously there's a gap in a lot of his stuff. You could jump, you can maybe like backdash away and then jump, or, do a special move, a button, like I said. Just depends on the character and the character he's fighting, what they have to use against him. A lot of characters, it sucks when characters jump out of his pressure. So like Milia, you have Chip, and then some other characters who are just pretty good in the air as well. And then like there's options to get around the opponent's mash. There are some things where the opponent could, like, May would do Dolphin and call out you trying to beat her mash, and, stuff like that could ultimately the risk reward is just not in your favor a lot of the times. But it was fine because if you're right, or if they just didn't know, which a lot of people didn't really know how to approach the character when he was getting his offense started, they kind of just sat back and let it happen, and then from there it was just a guessing game, right? Obviously, because one of the strengths was his offense being so good. Some characters can kind of just go straight into their offense, right? So you have like Happy Chaos, who kind of just goes into it, so stuff like that is more. But Happy Chaos is a rare case because like he's just so insane, especially in this current version that I'm playing on. But I guess the next weakness that I can bring up is his low defense. So he has very weak defense. He gets no confirms off his punishes on defense. So for example, if I guess right on let's say I guess right on a throw and I mash, this doesn't combo, this doesn't combo. Even you're in this situation, which is very poor, but you have to be right in their face to get this. You can't usually get it from range. Yeah, you can't get it from there. Yeah, this 5P doesn't combo into this. So you got no combo, so getting the opponent off you is very RPSable. A lot of the times you would do this and summon, which just was, a lot of the times, there was actually a gap that the opponent could RPS on, which wasn't really that fun. So you kind of had to get a little crafty with how you got out of certain situations. And I guess this kind of leads into the next point of him having low numbers, and that kind of means bad confirm. So what I mean by that, for example, if Johnny hits you in neutral, this happens, right? Obviously Johnny was not in this current version, right? But I mean, there's other characters that you can take that kind of just hit you and then do the world. Happy Chaos is one of them. Chip got good confirms off his whiff punishes. Biken currently gets good confirms off her whiff punishes. Not in this version. You have a whole bunch of characters. Ram, Geo, even though her whiff punishes were, I believe, stronger in season 3, earlier season 3. Sin, just characters like that kind of get, like a bunch of characters like Slayer get huge reward off their whiff punishes, and just existing on the screen, Soul, etc. The list kind of goes on and on, right? So him not getting, you know, consistent punishes and, you know, making good use of his hits was not the greatest. It kind of sucked, especially due to the, like, even on block strings, especially due to the lower attack level on his normals. Situations like this could be jumped out of on block, but I'm kind of more referring to on hit. On hit, this doesn't combo. You know, this doesn't combo. The P normals already don't combo. So it was very rough. But again, his strengths were so strong he was able to get around this. You know, and then the next two things I can mention are his lower HP. So his HP was, I believe at this time he was the third lowest HP character in the game, behind or right in front of Milia and Chip. And also he is the slowest character in the game with walk and back walk. So slowest walk and back walk in the game, I'm pretty sure. And you know, he doesn't have the slowest run speed. I believe he's outside of the big bodies, so Gold Lewis and Bedman. He is I believe the only character slower than him, I believe, are Bridget. Biken has slow acceleration in this version of the game, but now they just buffed it in Season 4. So in this current version, it was Biken that was slower than him, Happy Chaos, and Bridget, I believe. And then the big bodies, Bidman and Gold Lewis. So he was like bottom 5 in speed. He's pretty slow. It's hard to get around the screen a lot of times. Hard to, you know, kind of move around, especially just walking. I mean, you're so slow. And I believe the last weak point I'll mention is he is a very meter-hungry character. So what I mean by that is, due to not getting confirms or good hits, especially without Eddie, right? Because with Eddie, if you hit them while they're crouching, in this version, if you hit them when they were crouching, you can go into this, right? So this is a good example, right? So you can get good hits that can count, but they require Eddie, and it requires counter hit, and it requires them to be crouching. If they're standing, this doesn't work. So a lot of the times, so yeah, that doesn't work without counter hit. So a lot of the times, he's pretty meter hungry because what you would do is you would get the counter hit. Let's say Eddie would be dead, and then you'd have to do something like this, right? Do something like this, or you can do, right? So he was pretty meter hungry, but it wasn't really an issue because the Eddie timer came back so fast. So it was more in Season 3 when he got nerfed for the first time that you actually saw how meter hungry he was. Obviously, Wild Assault didn't exist at the time, but it wasn't needed for Zato because the Eddie timer was so low. It was, yeah, still a thing. So next, let's get into his offense, or the good, which you see, the offense is definitely like the best thing about him. You know, he is one of the characters in this game that off his mix-ups, he gets high reward. So Happy Chaos does lower damage on his mix-ups, or not in this version. I'm more referring to Season 3. When he got his damage nerf, he does lower damage on his mix-ups, but the reward is sending you through the wall. So I guess it was, yeah, there's that. But, you know, we see characters like Season 4, like Dizzy, does mix-ups, but the reward is pretty low, and it kind of just loops into itself. Where Zato's mix-ups, where he hits you, even especially in the corner, it just led to bigger damage than other typical mix-ups, right? So, good reward off his mix-ups, high damage. He had a strong runaway, so what that meant is, you know, when you were without Eddie, you had Fly, so obviously this did get nerfed, but he has Fly, so I believe it's 3 seconds in this current version, you know, so you were on the back end, kind of just leave the scene. His P-normals were arguably the best P-normals in the game. I mean, they hit so far, no travel time on them, right? These, even though they didn't lead to anything, they were a good, like, back-off button, they were amazing. Eddie was very strong in matchups that you could use him. So characters like Kai and Soul, Gold Lewis, matchups where Eddie was able to be used, due to Zato's archetype, obviously being a mix-up character, using Eddie in a lot of matchups was not consistent. And I guess that's another weakness. You couldn't really use him in situations where it just, like, where there was too much screen pollution, or, you know, characters just had certain tools like killing him at neutral. You know, characters like Testament, it's pretty hard to use Eddie. You know, characters like Happy Chaos, right? The list kind of goes on and on. But in matchups where you could use Eddie, it was very good due to the difficulty of getting around Eddie. Obviously, he dies pretty easy, but the risk of going in then led to the next, strength of Zato, which was the scare factor. A lot of times you would trade with Eddie. So you would hit Eddie, but then you'd get hit, you'd get knocked down, you'd get up, and then you look at this Zato's timer, the Eddie timer, and you're like, oh, I need to get it now because he's coming back in 2 seconds. So a lot of people would then try to do some weird approaches to Zato and ultimately get themselves killed for it. And, it was a lot of people lost their cool when it came to the Eddie timer, and they just didn't know how to approach him. It seemed like he was always there. And again, in matchups where he is present, Eddie is present, it was very hard to get around depending on your character. So another, going back to his offense, he had easy access to high lows, some left rights mid-screen, some fuzzies, right? Strong damage, good runaway. So yeah, he definitely had his weaknesses, but his offense was so good, and his ability to break the wall. Obviously, before Wall Assault came, it was pretty rare to break the wall off a hit anywhere on the screen. But Zato had some routes where, from a very far distance, he can end up just comboing into Eddie and, breaking the wall from, places almost full screen. Him and Happy Chaos kind of had this, special uniqueness to them of, when it came to breaking the wall off hits, they were able to break it. Obviously, it's more strict for Zato than Happy Chaos, as Happy Chaos literally could do a 2P and you're going through the wall. 2P non-counter, you're going through the wall, right? Zato was a little more strict. You had to be crouching, it had to be counter hit, so you had to get some good hits. There's also times where you could, hit them with, a 2H if they tried jumping, and then you could, do a combo that, would send them through the wall. So, he just had good corner carry, is what I'm trying to say. Even if you got hit by the drills, they push you to the corner pretty far. If he hit you with the mix-up, or he hit you with the 2D, right, then from there you can either choose to go for mid-screen with, some left-rights and whatnot, and then, or you could be a Zato that like to just get a knockdown, set up drills, and push them to the corner so that the mix-up you do will end up breaking the wall, and then you go in the sword. Yeah, his win con was very strong. Breaking the wall, he arguably had, he definitely did have one of the strongest win cons in the game. I'm sure there's some people out there that thought he had the biggest win con or the best win con in the game, but it was definitely one of the best, for, undoubtedly. Once he broke the wall, it actually felt like the game was over. He had bad matchups, but you had to, be very, you had to put parentheses around them, right? Bad matchups. There was only, a few actual doomer matchups, which, Mei, Ram, right? Those are the ones that come to mind. The last strength I can think of for Zato is, in this current version, obviously with Burst not going full screen, and Break the Law still being a thing, which, again, is used for mix-ups, like left-right mix-ups. The best thing about it was it baited your burst. So, I mentioned before how Zato has a hard time in neutral versus some characters, and with those matchups, when you get in, you need to stay in, because you need to get your win con started, you need to break the wall, you need to get started, because, the neutral was just so hard to play, you didn't want to go back. So, one thing Zato had was Break the Law before used to bait your burst in YRC, so you do stuff like this, and then you got a whole combo. Zato is a very burst safe character in this version of the game. He had good burst OSs, burst safe combos, everything. It was hard to burst him, to the point where you had to, burst off, a bad place to burst in this game is off close slash. Since close slash and 5K are both jump cancelable, they could easily just go into baiting your burst. But off hits that no other character would be able to bait your burst, especially on non-counter hit, Zato was able to, which made him very unique. Far slash, 2D, 2P, 5H, 2H, right? And these all led to full combo, so you would get hit. And then you're going to this situation where Zato sets up Eddie, right? And then you're going to hold another mix-up. You just lost a bunch of your life. You have no more burst. He can keep his burst, right? He's now in positive. He's gaining meter. It was extremely, extremely strong. But yeah, sadly, this Zato then got his wings clipped and was shot dead in the street. Let's go to that version where the game is just totally changed. Nothing is the same. So let me pull up that Zato and I'll give you guys the breakdown. I am here with this Zato. This is the start of Season 3. You can tell because look how much, oh my gosh, look how much Wild Assault takes away on block and hit. This is so much. Yeah, this game was truly in a dark time. Let me explain. Okay, let's get into it. So this Zato, he got nerfed a lot, like very, very heavy. The biggest thing off the bat is the Eddie timer. So I will show the side by side, but this is the Eddie timer in this version. Okay, very long time. So this hurt a lot. The Eddie timer was definitely a big change. Definitely the biggest change, and it's something I still stand by to this day. That I believe if they don't end up changing it, then he will forever be bad. It just obviously he's in those like in line for a new move, so it should be interesting to see what it does. But I mean, this Eddie timer just hurts. It shuts down a lot of things he does. And sadly, one of the things in this current version of 3.0 is before, okay, so the Eddie timer before matched with the duration of the command grab. So when you would go for command grab, it would always refill Eddie just because, again, they were in sync. So it getting nerfed and then going for command grab looked like this. So he's like halfway done to like 65% done, right? Which is a huge nerf. So essentially his offense became it didn't become worse because in exchange they buffed the recovery time on Summon Eddie, meaning, you know, his RPS situations, he was able to RPS better versus some characters when summoning Eddie, due to him being able to act out of it, you know, as summoning Eddie faster. And it was a good change. It was a very strong change, but it just wasn't enough for the nerfs. So let's get back to the nerfs. So we have the Eddie timer. The 2P and the 5P received nerfs. They reduced the frontal hitbox and hurtbox on startup, meaning the 2P and 5P essentially had travel time, which he already had weak neutral and poor confirms off his hits. So this change kind of hurt him a lot for sure. The next thing they did was they made flight. So they decreased the timer by, or the time that you're able to be in the air by, I believe, 60 frames. So it went from, I believe, 3 seconds to 2 seconds. So yeah, I mean, look, dude. This just made, so this nerf and this nerf plus the Eddie timer just made his runaway game faster. The Eddie timer also, like, it just made his offense weird. So he became more meter hungry. So like I said before, he wasn't as meter hungry due to the Eddie timer already being so good. Because by the time you, like, for example, a lot of times you see Zato when he loses Eddie nowadays, he'll do something like this. Oh. Right, and then usually Eddie will be back and he can just go into it like drills, right, and set up his offense. But due to the timer being so long, in a lot of different situations, you had to go for this, and then this, right? And then you use Wild Assault. And he still, right? So it made the scare factor of Zato. Before it was, oh my gosh, how do I approach him? Eddie's already about to come back. Now you kill Eddie, and essentially there was times where you just won the game. If Zato had no Eddie mashing you in pressure, then, you know, he can't loop plus frames. He doesn't have anything like outside of Eddie that, you know, he could just be looping to keep. He was bad at keeping his turn. He just couldn't do much. So without Eddie, there was no worry like, oh, Zato's making me block. Like, okay, who really cares, right? It didn't matter too much. He couldn't hurt you. There was nothing he could do to actually make you scared to not repeat the same dumb option again. So he essentially just dropped down the tier list. One of the other things they did, which is sad, they reworked Break the Law. So what they did, it went from a tool where a mix-up tool / burst bait tool, and which obviously made him one of the best characters versus burst in the game. It didn't matter versus burst before if Eddie died because he came back so fast that to the point where you didn't feel it at sometimes. Right, you get bursted and then you get sent full screen and then you come back and then you get your turn. And by the time you get your turn started again, Eddie is already back, right? Again, due to the timer being so fast. Now, one of the issues he has with burst is he's now the worst character versus burst. as Break the Law no longer beats Burst. So now, oh, so you can't bait Burst anymore, which, like I already mentioned before, he already had weak neutral. So when you got in and you were able to bait the opponent's Burst, it essentially meant you kept your turn and they gave up their Burst. So the next time you get them to block, you know, you do your damaging route, you break the wall, and the next time you're able to hit them with the mix-up, the game was probably over, right? So he went from, again, a really strong character to just kind of very mediocre. This was huge. So, nerfs, total nerfs. P-normals became a lot worse, which was his main use of, I mean, just, those were his two main buttons in neutral, outside of 2S. So, P-normals became a lot worse. Eddie takes longer to come back. Flight got nerfed. Break the Law no longer baits Burst, and the command grab became unusable in situations, which hurt his offense, but his offense, again, like I said, did get buffed a bit because you're now able to do things you couldn't do before with the Break the Law, with the Summon Eddie recovery buff. Some of the mix-ups can be, I did make a video on some Zato mix-ups, so I'm sure you can find some examples in there, but yeah, this was a definitely good buff, just wasn't good compensation for what he received. On top of that, Wild the Soul obviously came to the game, and it locked you out of your Burst. This was good for Zato, don't get me wrong, but it was good for him. And I think the reason he got nerfed to begin with is that the devs were scared of him with Blue Wild Assault. Because, I mean, the Eddie timer was already so fast before that. With him with Blue Wild Assault would just be like, I don't know. I'm not... There's some people out there that said it wouldn't have mattered. There's some people that said he would have been broken. Like, we will never know. But it definitely sounds interesting. I don't want to give my thoughts on it too much, but again, it would have been interesting to see. But yeah, he essentially got killed, and then obviously Wild Assault hard knockdown. So what this meant is, in a game as having the weakest defense in the game, you essentially were made to block more by other characters. You had the lowest HP and the weakest defense, so it felt like as Zato, if you got hit with Wild Assault through the wall, you essentially lost. And it was harder for Zato to actually get that situation started due to the nerfs and him just being so poor in quality as a character that he just didn't really use it too well, it felt. Maybe the situation would have been turned if he was his old self with Blue Wild Assault, but we'll never know. So yeah, and then, I mean, throughout the patches, Zato just got some changes. Let me go grab current Zato. I will give you, oh, wait, actually, there was one more thing they did. Sorry, it's so useless, I actually forgot. So, like I said, they reworked Break the Law, so it no longer baits your Burst. So, no longer baits Burst, but it still is a mix-up tool for sure. One of the things they did is they added a Eddie swap. So, essentially, this move was in, I believe it was in the older Guilty Gear Accent Core plus R, and so this move allows you to swap with Eddie. This move on release, none of the Zato players can find a use for it. There was no use for ever using this, ever. It was so bad that you couldn't even use Eddie, you couldn't use the move while Eddie had the opponent in block stun. So what this meant, I can switch with Eddie here, so Break the Law and then down. But if Eddie puts the opponent in block stun, you can't just teleport, switch places, so essentially Eddie then puts them out of block stun, and you're just... yeah, the move, you couldn't continue plus frames with the move. You were always minus. So, yeah, no, it was just really bad. It was unusable. Like, there literally was no use for the move. So, basically all he got was a recovery buff on Eddie Summon and then lost his whole kit. So, yeah. He did get some buffs in the future. There were outside... so this was the first patch, which was Season 3. First patch of Season 3. And then there's 3.5 Zato, and then you have 4.0 Zato. I will go grab 4.0 Zato, because obviously the changes from 3.5 are still on the character. And then I can also talk about the changes he got in 4.0 and my thoughts on them now that we've had more than a week of the patch. So let me go grab 4.0, and I'll be back. Yeah, this is Season 4 Zato. So he got... again, before Season 4, there were two other patches after the first patch of 3.0. There was a small balance patch that helped that changed a bunch of characters, but nothing major. And then there was another small balance patch that only focused on helping the weaker characters of the cast, which are the videos I've made, the first videos I've actually made, where I did a video with Trevor Sue for Axel, MJ Karase for Johnny, yeah, and the list goes on. I believe there's like 4 of the characters. Elusive for Testament, a boy for Potemkin, I can't remember too well. The point is that he did get some changes. So, Season 4 obviously has all these changes, so I will show them off. And this patch of 3, I believe it was 1.33, it was a terrible patch for Zato. I mean, well, all they did, realistically, is they made Wall of Assault consume less burst. Now, obviously, so it looks like this. So consumes less burst instead of taking a huge chunk. Obviously, Uncharged Wall Assault barely takes, yeah. It's pretty much like the same. But the change for Zato. Okay, so enough about system mechanics. What did they do to Zato to buff him? Why is he still bad even though he's only been getting buffed? Well, let me show you. So, the only thing the character got was this. So, yes, Invite Hell launch speed increased by 40%. So this made, on hit, the knockdown went from plus 28 to plus 30. This did nothing. You couldn't even feel it. It literally did nothing. I can't over-exaggerate. It's not downplay. They literally didn't do anything. He got nothing. He essentially stayed the same. At the start of 3.0, it was a question whether or not Zato was actually the worst. It was hard to believe that a character from Season 2 and Season 1 of placing well and, you know, being the character that was in every top 8 of any event, online or offline, to being the, like, to getting nerfed so heavy that he was, that people were trying to wonder if he was the worst. So in Season 3, he was anywhere from bottom 1 to, like, bottom 5. I mean, if you knew, he was obviously bottom 1. But it was then confirmed, like, he was undeniably the worst character in this version after getting this change. It was nothing. He was already the worst, already one of the worst, and then he got treated like he was the best character in the game, which we don't understand. So, yeah, basically, what they did is they just changed the knockdown. That did nothing. Some characters got some big changes in this patch. Some characters did get nerfed, so I guess it kind of helped him a bit, but he was just still weak. Couldn't bait your, became the worst character versus burst. His offense didn't feel as special anymore because while the still existing characters were able to break the wall from, like, whatever hit, you know. He wasn't, he just wasn't unique anymore. He just lost all meaning, it felt like. Thankfully, though, the devs acknowledged that him and some other characters were lacking behind the rest of the cast by too much. So they did another balance patch where they changed some things. It was a minor balance patch, but to be honest, the patch was mainly to fix the system mechanics of Wild Assault, which a lot of people were unhappy with, and the way burst works and wall sticks and whatnot. So just a system mechanic patch. But Zato did end up getting some changes. One of the changes he got is, before, I mentioned how at the start of the video, when Zato got bursted, it didn't matter so much because Eddie would die, but it was so fast that, the Eddie timer was so fast that it didn't, you got hit and you're like, oh, I don't care. Because by the time I get back in, my turn is going to start and I'm going to have Eddie, you know. Obviously in this version, if you get bursted, so, you know, you get bursted, right? Thankfully, the change they did is they made it so if Eddie gets hit by a burst or YRC, he will start charging up at where he died. So, for example, I use Pierce. You see the little meter I use for Pierce. He bursted. Eddie recharges where he, you know, died. This was good. This was very good. There was some issues to this, though. Okay. One of them being that if I set the opponent to, okay, I can't set him to throw attack, or maybe I can, so one of the things is he died from throw tech, which was horrible, especially because during this time his command grab was still unusable, and the other thing was he died off gold burst. So burst he would recharge to where he died. Gold burst would just kill him completely. So gold burst was a legitimate option for Zato, which was pretty sucky. But again, this change was good. You can tell they really don't want to change the Eddie timer itself. They're kind of balancing around. Again, they really want to put their foot down when it comes to the Eddie timer and break the law, because again, they reworked break the law to give him like the Eddie swap feature and take away the burst bait feature of it. And then they obviously want to keep the timer but give Zato ways to, I guess, make Eddie hard to get rid of, I guess, which it didn't change much because, okay, you still can't use Eddie in a lot of matchups, which is the issue. More than half the characters in the cast deal with Eddie so well that you're better off just not using him because he's guaranteed to die at a lot of points in the game. The next change they did, though, was an Eddie change. They made they increased his movement speed by 33%. So if you can tell if you've ever labbed Zato, Eddie moves super fast, right? But again, this doesn't matter because you still can't use Eddie like this in a lot of his matchups. What it did matter for is, since they increased the version... Okay, so they decreased the startup of Pierce, which essentially gave him combos on standing hit now. So, this now, you know how before I said it had to be crouching counter hit? Well, standing counter hit works now as well. And since Eddie moved faster, it basically allowed Eddie to always combo and pick up due to how fast he was moving, which was good for some combo consistency. Wasn't really good for anything else besides that, you know. So, and I guess the Pierce startup change was good for some RPS situations. So, it was good, but again, these are buffs that you would give the worst character in the game. The other thing they did, and this is what I mean by they really wanted to put their foot down of not allowing Break the Lot of Bait burst anymore. They made it it was no longer an Eddie swap. They made it an Eddie teleport. So what I mean by this is before, as I showed you, Eddie, you had to swap to Eddie. But now, you can... Sorry, you swap positions with Eddie. But now they made it so you swap to Eddie, or you teleport to him. So you see how he doesn't go behind me anymore and take my place? I go to him, right? This change, there's like some uses for it in combos, but besides that, you're never ever using this in neutral. There's no character it's good against where it's legitimate strategy. It is still useless. It doesn't do anything. I've never actually seen a Zato use this in tournament or anything, or a high-level Zato. I mean, if you're joking around, having fun, you can use it, but honestly, the best change he got this patch was the combos for standing and crouching on counter hit. This made it so in a lot of matchups that, okay, before, as I mentioned, Zato had bad confirms, and a lot of times versus characters that just got, hit you and then did the world for their confirms, at least you can kind of keep up with them since, you're also doing high damage off your hits and confirming into wall breaks. The issue is when Eddie is dead, you still have the same issue of you can't confirm. So, right? I couldn't do anything. Like, there's no sort of combo to be done, which is one of the main issues. Yeah, so his numbers were better, but he was just so inconsistent because without Eddie, he just wasn't a character. He couldn't survive as a character. There's just nothing he could have done. Those were sadly all the changes he got, and then after this patch, it led to the Season 4 balance patch. Obviously, as I think I've already mentioned, but Wild of Soul obviously lost its hard knockdown in that version. But in Season 4, second patch of Wild of Soul not hard knockdowning, and obviously the current version of the game with Queen Dizzy being the first DLC character, Zato got some more changes, which this one is funny because it's actually debatable if he got nerfed, which is crazy. He's been undisputed bottom 1 for over a year, and these changes they're kind of funny. Okay, so one of the things they did to start, so I mentioned before how Zato had bad confirms, and without Eddie he wasn't a character, and there were no confirms to really be done or damage to be done without Eddie. So without Eddie, they made it so far slash non-counter hit, whether you're standing or crouching, combos into invite hell. So what this meant, okay, so this meant, obviously this worked, but the issue with this is you never use this button. This button is terrible. It's, okay, not terrible, it's a good round start tool because it's 10 frames. It's just very easily whiff punishable. It doesn't have crazy range to it. It's not the greatest, I will not lie. So with this change, you can't even feel it too much. I'm not gonna lie. It would have been better if a lot of Zato players were complaining that they should have moved it to 2S. because what they did, they basically increased the attack level of Far Slash so that it combos into Invite Hell. The only, to be honest, the best thing about this, like, Far Slash leading to Invite Hell is obviously the attack level being higher means that before, when you did this, before when you did a summon, like this, you could jump this a lot of the times, right? But now, because the attack level is increased, this is actually a good button to summon Eddie on and get, like, RPS started to get, like, drills and Eddie fully on the opponent. So that was actually the best change that they did to Far Slash. The Far Slash Invite Hell, I could care less, right? A lot of Zato players just don't really care about it. The reason is you don't press this button in neutral to begin with. It's just not a great button. And even the reward, like, dude, okay, look at this. This Oki is terrible, right? It's not like you're doing stuff like this, right? It's not like you're getting a hard knockdown and you're taking the space, whether you want to do this, it's like a card, or whether you want to do, or whether you want to do this into a dash meaty close slash, right? It wasn't the same. It was just really bad. And the only place that actually, like, works is, like, the corner. But even then, it's still not great Oki. The next thing they did is, how I mentioned before that we wanted 2S to be buffed, to have the attack level increased. They decided not to, and what they did is they increased the active frames. So, like I said before, it was very easy to backdash this 2S before. So, essentially this. They just made it so you can't backdash this as consistently now because it has 6 frames of active. It's 6 active instead of 4. But even then, the issue with this is, so when you catch characters, there's some characters in the game, not many, but they actually stay on the ground during their backdash. So when you go and you punish their backdash, you actually can't even get the Invite Hell. So the active frames don't even matter on the change. But against characters that did backdash, I guess it was like a, like, hey, don't do that. It's, it's pretty good for that, but the reward is just still so low at calling out backdash that it's it's not that great. I wish they just increased the attack level so this combo worked. Then it would have been better since you're always using this. They also reduced the recovery on it, which is pretty good. They reduced it by like 2 frames. So I believe it's 18 instead of 20. The next thing they did, one thing he always had is his command. So at the start of the video, how I showed his command grab working with Eddie. So for example, if he dies, they made it so the final hit always refills Eddie. So his command grab became usable again. But again, the command grab was it was a good command grab, and having a command grab is good. But like, it was probably amongst the command grabs in the game, like Nago, May. It was probably considered like the worst, or one of the worst. But that doesn't matter. The fact that it's actually usable again, you could use it in setups, and actually have some sort of scare factor with it, well, it's nice. They did an oppose change, where oppose basically stays on the screen longer before it collapses. This change, you kind of see the bar going a little slower before it actually just goes out. So, yeah, this change is useless. I will not hold you. I hate to sound like I'm downplaying, but it's truly just not good. The biggest... Okay, so besides that, they increased the damage across the board for every, like, for a lot of character special moves, so Zato got that change as well. So it was universal, so again, not really like a direct buff to him, but everyone got it. They gave him more HP, which, again, all characters in the game besides one got more HP. And that was it. Now, you're like, oh, well, how did he get nerfed? So, let me tell you why. Okay. So, Zato got nerfed by... There were 2 really big things that they nerfed. So, I mentioned before that Zato is a pretty meter-hungry character, because when Eddie's dead, it's hard to, actually make them block long enough to get Eddie back. So in situations you would do like, this, right? And the Eddie timer, you would kind of have to stall for it back until it, actually came back. One thing he had was you could go into Sword Super, and you would make them block Sword Super off a high attack level normal, like 5H, that has a lot of blocks done. So you essentially do this, and it was, okay, to be fair, it was a knowledge check, but it was... Against people that didn't really know, it was really good. It was really good, and you essentially could skip the timer and then get your offense started for 50 bar. Of course, you could super it, right? If a character's had like a full screen super like Kai, or a super that advanced forward like Kai, Sin, you know, big supers like Nago, Ram. You couldn't really outspace it, but you could outspace DPs with it. So a lot of characters could not DP you in this situation. I believe the only character that actually could DP was like Sin. Some characters you could dodge their supers from doing at range, like Gold Lewis, for example. You know, so it was good. But what they did is they nerfed it, so they nerfed the sword super. They basically increased the recovery to perform an action. So Eddie basically after the sword is in recovery. So basically it's a way bigger gap, meaning you could just basically hit him out every time the sword super is done, which was a huge nerf. And then they universally nerf 6Ps across the board. So if you've ever fought in Zato, oh my gosh, so if you've ever fought in Zato, you probably have been 6P spammed to death by Zato. And, you know, it was, dude, his 6P was a broken neutral 6P. Very broken. It was active for 8 frames, 13 frames of recovery. It just clipped everything in its path, right? It was such a good 6P. And to be fair, in a lot of matchups, your buttons were so useless, you kind of just went in and sprayed around the 6P and prayed it worked, and you either flew and tried to get lucky, or you just spam 6P and hope you got lucky and then set up your offense, right? One of those two. Flight already got nerfed, so it was harder to do that, but you still had your 6P. The issue is they universally nerfed 6Ps, so it went from 8 active frames to 6, and then 12 frames of recovery to 20. It also became worse on block, but to be fair, you didn't even use the super like that on block, so it doesn't matter. But this getting nerfed meant essentially Zato was... a lot of his matches became a lot worse. We're never really trying to 6P Zato neutral, so he doesn't care too much about the nerf to, like, the 6Ps getting nerfed, because 6Ps weren't really used against him, due to your main button being this, and, you know, like this. But he cared about the 6P nerf to, like, for him using it, because a lot of characters like Kai, Johnny, you know, etc., like Biken, you needed this. I mean, not even those characters. In every matchup, you needed the 6P. It was your button. It was his button. The only thing, I feel like a lot, like I said, it was like the only thing he had neutral going for him. So the fact that they nerfed 6Ps across the board hurt him the most. Out of any character in the game, it hurt him the most. Testament had the best 6P, but Zato used 6P the most. Like, by far, undoubtedly, he was the biggest user of 6P. So, it getting nerfed and, you know, kind of shit on hurt him, like I said, the most. And then, already nerfed Sword Super, so, again, his off is stalling, I guess. Like, you now have to stall a lot harder, because, again, you're not just farming meter. There were times where you were about to build 50 bar, right? And, you know, the Eddie timer, like, just started, like, recharging, so you have, like, 10 seconds or 8 seconds or whatever, right? And then you would, you know, stall for meter, and then, you know, you would go into the sword. Now you kind of have to just do stuff like this and, you know, stall and stall and stall, which is a lot weaker. So, it definitely hurt, and yeah, that's pretty much all the changes. He is still the worst character in the game. The characters that were around his level got buffed pretty heavy, like Biken, Johnny, even though I think Johnny was never really terrible like that, but Biken, Johnny, Testament, stuff like that, right? So, yeah, he is just out of the scene. We'll have to wait. The devs recently announced that they know a lot of people are unhappy with the patch, you know, so we'll kind of have to wait and see what they have in store for us. Obviously, he is in line for a new move, like I said earlier. So who knows? This new move could be broken. It could be trash. Let's keep our spirits high. But yeah, I just want to make a quick video, or I guess not quick. It's probably pretty long, but I want to make a video on Zato, kind of giving you guys the breakdown of my thoughts on him throughout the patches and kind of what's happened. Hopefully, we can see him again soon. I mean, regardless if you love or hate him, I think he's very fun to watch. He's very cool. I know a lot of people out there somehow still hate fighting him to this day, which I don't understand. But if he ever becomes good one day, I will make a Zato counterplay guide. But he actually has to be a character in the game for me to do that. I don't think anyone really cares about Zato's like strengths and all that like now, because he's so like useless. But yeah. Also, oh yeah, Alpha also got buffed to the moon. Biken, Alpha, Johnny, Testament's pretty strong. Point is, yeah, that's it. Thanks everyone for watching, and again, I have a lot of videos coming out, so please continue to support. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.